some questions. The microphone for questions is on a stand right over there.
Professor Rushton, how significant is the high incidence of marriage to first cousins for the IQ results among South Asians?
Thank you, Paul. That's a good question. There's some statistics that just came out showing that in England, South Asians comprise 3% of the population and 10% of birth defects. And one of the reasons people think is because first cousins are marrying one another. And if you marry first cousins who are married first cousins who are marrying first cousins, you build in its inbreeding depression. And we know that inbreeding depression also causes a lower IQ. And so it is certainly possible that some of that lower South Asian IQ is due to the marriage of first cousins. And we know that some people are saying that in Iraq and some of the Arab world, one of the problems in building a nation is that people are so tribal, which is like family-oriented, because the genetic inbreeding is such that your loyalty to your extended family is so much greater than it is here in North America, and we can... So cousin marriages is a big problem, and it's an interesting explanation for things.
I don't know of any studies, but I get the impression that Indians from India in the United States are not low IQ. Is this because it's the more intelligent Indians who have migrated to the United States? Selective immigration?
I think Michael Hart makes a very good point that the Indians that we notice over here, in fact, are almost higher scorers than white people. They earn more money, they dominate in physics departments, engineering departments of universities. They're very overrepresented in information technology. They do extremely well, entrepreneurial and so on. And the question is why? And I think Michael Hart's own explanation fits. Selective migration. If you have an average IQ yourself of 120, let's say, you don't really want to live in a country with an average IQ of 83. You really want to get away from that low IQ population group. So also, 1% of 1.5 billion people is an awful lot of people. And it's commensurate with the possibility that countries like Pakistan and India in fact have an elite which is capable of creating nuclear weapons and so on, and a great technological society. But as a percentage, they are dragging an enormous chain with them, anchor of a low IQ population. And if you look at breeding patterns, of course, we all know that it's the bottom half of the population, the lower IQ half of the population, which is having all the children. And if you're in India, where you've got 1.5 million people, 1.5 billion people, that's an awful lot of children that's dragging down the average IQ.
A second question, is there any evidence that the IQ of sub-Saharan Africans has declined in recent centuries or in recent decades?
I don't know of any, no. And some people say I just don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Professor Rushton, now, I think that eugenics is a moral commitment, not a racial affiliation. Now, if that is the case, wouldn't the influx or immigration of less favored races into our society possibly serve as a positive advantage to the eugenic movement? Because unless we adopt a eugenic program, rather than simply saying, oh, you're a different race, get out, we could use their presence as a political force in order to tell the people, if we have a eugenic movement which recommends the increase of the birth rate from the people who are the most productive and the most creative, regardless of race, then we can continue to evolve to the next more highly evolved species above, Homo sapiens. Would not then racism in and of itself fail to provide the necessary political form that we need to progress, and that eugenics would be the actual answer?
Okay, well, thanks for the thought.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, Professor Rushton, in view of the opposition that you and other researchers have encountered from the establishment about your research, I once read a suggestion that perhaps they should try to do this research in China, because the Chinese, being overwhelmingly Han, they do not have these different blocks. There's not this social opposition. But on the other hand, the Chinese, these studies are expensive. The Chinese don't have the money. What money they do have, they propose to put in advancing the military. But now, just after listening to you, it seems that it's considerably easier now than it was to get these things published and so forth. So do you think that situation about perhaps trying to establish genetic IQ studies institutions in China just irrelevant, that you're going to be pretty well accepted in the mainstream?
Well, it's very hard to predict, especially about the future.
Dr. Rushton, I was intrigued by your mentioning that it's apparent that apparently it's easier to sell or your results or get them accepted by the mainstream scientific community when test takers are given their test by someone of the same race. Now, I wonder if you gave your tests in racially segregated environments for the students as well. I know that one of the major motivations for mandatory integration was the theory that black school children would do so much better if seated next to white school children. And have you tested that hypothesis? Have you tested the scores of various racial groups when they're in mixed environments when taking the test compared to when they're not?
We ourselves haven't, but other people have, and it really doesn't make any difference.
Just one last question. I'm sorry, we're running out of time.
Okay. Professor Rushton, in the little psychometric ghetto that you and your fellow researchers inhabit, you're doing incredible research on IQ. However, in the rest of the university, students are taught by professors and administrators that there is no such thing as IQ, or a science of IQ, and that only a racist would even claim that such science exists. So how much of a future at Western universities does psychometric research have?
Well, I think that under one guise or another, intelligence research is blossoming. For example, in the U.S. military uses IQ tests. They use a different name. For every new incoming person, we have good IQ data from the U.S. military from World War I all the way up to today. Industrial organizational psychologists use IQ tests all the time to choose executives and so on. We have masses of IQ data from IO psychology. These tests are being used, even No Child Left Behind by the Bush administration, which is in the school systems. In effect, what they do is they give you educational tests. Educational tests for different minorities and so on are themselves a rather poor but nonetheless valid measure of intelligence. The SAT scores, GRE scores that you need to get into university and so on, the LCATs if you want to get into law school, all of these can be viewed as a form of general intelligence. And military and government agencies around the world now, in China or Israel or England, in Holland, for example, where they have all kinds of immigrants, and they want to give IQ tests for people who want to work on the buses or on the trains, and they've been doing that for 20 or 30 years. The Dutch Army have been given the Ravens progressive matrices ever since about 1945. So these IQ tests are not going out. They may